All right, this is Karen Billings again at SIIA, and today's webinar is on our Vision K-20 survey results. And we're pleased that you all are here to join us today. For those who can see the slides but really can't hear us, then I'm not sure you're going to know exactly how to call in, but there is a message down at the bottom. Chairperson to all, and I think my message both. Go ahead and call in so you can hear us. And for those of you who are on the phone but don't see the slides yet, please go to readytalk.com and go ahead and log in with the information that's requested. So just a few moments, since there are people on the call that aren't members of SIIA, and we certainly welcome you all today, whether you're a member or not. We do have just a note here about the fact that we are a trade association, so our members are the companies, and in this case our education members who provide technologies that address educational needs. We have a number of committees and or working groups for those of you who are members and would like to either help us out on the Education Business Forum Steering Committee, which is starting to meet, or any of the other working groups and committees that you see there. We have a couple of events that we're going to be coming up. We have a business forum in New York, December 10th and 11th, and our industry summit in San Francisco. We'll be talking about the Vision K-20 survey today, which is a major initiative of ours, but there are three others that are going on. For those of you who are at companies, please try and fill out our survey. And if you would like to know more about that, please just send me a quick email, kbillings@siia.net, and I'll send you a link so that you can fill that survey out and get a report that's being sold for $1,500. The CODI Awards, which is our annual awards program for the EdTech community, is opening in August. We will have applications open for the nominations for the products, and we'll be opening up nominations soon thereafter for anyone who would like to judge. So if you are an educator and or in the education community and would like to help us judge, please do so, and you'll see information about that even if you just go to our SIIA.net website and click on CODIs. All the information will be there in August. The other thing that opens in August, particularly for the startups, is if you can if you're interested in our Innovation Incubator program, we have 2 cycles a year, and the one for the Education Business Forum is opening in August, and we look forward to seeing all of our new applications for that, because there's quite a large startup community now. On the Ed Division team, we just wanted to sort of let you know who's on the call today. I'm Karen Billings, and LaDerby is actually sort of helps us organize the webinars here. She runs a lot of our education programs and is helping us through this whole process of getting the slides ready for you. Lindsay Harman is our Education Market and Policy Analyst, and she is going to be on the call as well. Mark Schneiderman is on vacation this week, but he helps us with our education policy, and Jonathan helps us with everything else that we need to have done in our division here in Washington, D.C. We have 2 great speakers today. The first is Sue Collins, and she right now runs a little company called CollinsConsults, and she is in, I believe, the state of Oregon. I've known Sue for a long time, and she's had a number of really great jobs, from being a science teacher to working with state departments of public instruction to being at companies, and she really helped us get the Vision project underway about 5-6 years ago. Susan Meell is CEO of MMS Education. They have been helping SIIA with the survey and with the survey results and writing up the report for the last few years, and we really appreciate the work that they do. They do a lot of work with companies in helping them target their customers and get the information that they need. And certainly if you have surveys that you'd like to have done, I would recommend Susan. So on today, now that we've sort of gone through the introductions that we have here, we want to get started so you have most of the time to listen to the overview of our survey and look at the results. They will go through that, and then Lindsay's going to talk a little bit about our partners, and then of course we'll have time for questions at the end. If you have a question, please go ahead and enter it in the chat box on the lower left box of the whole web screen that you're on. You can type the message to either one of the speakers or to all of us or to everyone, and we will try and respond to it. We will particularly try and make sure that everybody does see the question and that you are filled in with the responses that you need. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Sue Collins and let her give you a little bit of history about this and how things got started and where we're at today. So Sue, are you with us?
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Karen. So welcome everyone who's on the call. The Vision project started actually at SIIA in 2007 as a means for us to put a collective view of the power of technology for the improvement of education forward, both for our individual members of SIIA as well as the partner organizations, but also for people who make decisions about the market that we live in. So policymakers, including everyone from the federal government down to state and local government. So what we tried to do was put together a sort of a long-range vision that we felt would be able to stay in place during that time. So as you can see, we did that in 2007. We piloted the survey that we're going to talk about the results in 2008, and we've conducted surveys ever since 2009. So, and Susan Meell is going to talk about the results of this year's survey. In the meantime, the K-20 vision, and that's an important concept that it does go beyond K-12. It includes post-secondary, was about a belief that every K-20 institution in this country should have an instructional and institutional framework that embraced technology and e-learning so that we supported personalized learning, equity, tracking of student performance, collaboration, maximizing the infrastructure effectiveness, and building great student skills in 21st century components. So that was the goal of the vision, and you'll see that on the slide you have in front of you. In order to take that and move it into something that was practical and something that would be trackable, we also put together a set of 7 educational goals and 5 technology measures. And I'm not going to read them through, but you can see how those kind of walk through that initial vision and provide a set of goals against which we could survey districts and institutions of higher education. And against those educational goals, we put together a set of technology goals. So things like anytime, anywhere learning, using 21st century tools, closing the achievement gap, using technology as a direct means of doing that, using technology-based assessment tools, and enabling the enterprise. So when we put together the survey, the thing we did was we were able to assess each of those components, and we did then create out of this vision an assessment tool that we've been using since 2008. There were 20 benchmark statements that were about progress. So I should move my cursor there here. And it provides educators at least an annual tool against which they can measure their progress towards these educational goals and their use of technology. So we as an industry get this snapshot of how educators across K-20 feel about their progress, feel about their status, and we have a way to say we're moving forward, schools are more deeply integrated into achieving these goals or to integrate it into using the technology. So, and that has done really well. When Susan came and her team came on, we were actually able to make some really significant changes to the survey that I think have added great value. So this is a sample of the survey. This happens to be the benchmark about 21st century tools. And initially we started out with only the top row. So the educator who was taking the survey would respond anywhere from of those 5 parameters, from delivered primarily through print materials through don't know, not applicable. What we were able to add last year was this idea of what's your ideal. So we had a way to test our vision against what educators thought was what they really should be able to do and wanted to do. So that gave us this way of saying not only can we benchmark against what they're doing, but we also know what their ultimate goal is. And I think because of that ad, we have been able to look at many different things that were important that we weren't able to look at in the past. So we had great turnout again this year about the survey. We were able to make some additional changes this year in the survey, and I'm going to turn it over to Susan Meell to talk through those changes as well. So Susan?
Thank you, Sue, and thanks, Karen, and everybody at SIIA. And just to reinforce, to let everybody who's listening to the webinar, all of the slides and the reports are available online and will be available at SIIA's website. I've seen a few chats about that, so just wanted to reinforce again that this is being recorded and everything is available, the PowerPoint, the full report, and the webinar itself. And to let you know, too, what we're going to cover today are really just the key findings and the highlights. There's lots and lots more information in the full report, and encourage everyone to go out and look at that. So as we mentioned, this year in the 2013 survey, we wanted to add some questions about BYOD because that is such a hot topic to find out really, and we were very specific about asking them 3 questions. 1, do they allow students to bring their own device into the classroom? We were very intentional about saying into the classroom. Are there any restrictions on the devices now? And then what do they look for in the future in terms of both allowing students to bring devices in and restrictions? And today, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the organization, about how we're going to be sharing this information. First, I'll tell you a little bit about the participants who actually took the survey and participated. We'll address the BYOD question, the answers on that. And then we'll look at the current versus ideal level of integration, both for K-12 and postsecondary. We'll look at some of the specific changes in benchmark statements over the years. Then we'll address both the technology measures and the 7 education goals in terms of how they performed this year compared to the previous 2 years. And then we'll talk about the challenges and highlights. So that's going to be that's a quick overview of the structure for today. So looking at the participants, again, we came in with just a little over 1,400 total participants this year. K-12, about the same number, about 1,000, and then post-secondary dropped just a little bit. But as you can see, we made big gains between 2011 and 2012. Participants are educators, and they determine when, at the very beginning of the survey, they determine whether they're answering the survey on behalf of their district or institution, if it's post-secondary, their building, and then whether it's at the classroom level or not. So it's building and department or classroom. And so that they're answering it from a very specific point of view throughout the survey. In terms of who actually took the survey, this is very similar to previous years in that K-12 was split about a third between at the district level and versus secondary and elementary. And then post-secondary was split between 2-year and 4-year, 35 and 65%. Again, very representative of previous year. And the participants are invited to participate through all of the wonderful partners with SIIA, their members, who deploy emails, as well as SIIA deploys emails out to their members, encouraging any educator to take the survey. And they can take the survey, and then they can print it, and then they'll also get a copy of this report, and they can see how their institution or their classroom or their district is performing against the national standards. in terms of the mix of participants, it's about 50%, and was both last year and this year, is at the what we call the professor, instructor, teacher level, and then the other 50% are split between, as you see here, IT, technology directors, librarians, media specialists, department chairs, principals, deans, so at the higher kind of administrative level. Again, very representative and pretty amazing year over year how similar the responses are, given how we encourage so many different educators to participate from many different levels. In terms of the bring your own device, it's very interesting in that about almost half of all secondary and K-12 participants are saying that they currently allow students to bring their own device into the classroom, much higher with 2-year and 4-year, where it's closer to 83 and 95%. You'll see elementary is still quite low at only 20%. I don't think that's too unusual or unexpected. Then we asked them if not now, within a year or within 1 to 5 years. And you can see here how dramatically that's going to increase, with elementary over the next 5 years, almost 70% of them saying that they would allow students to bring their own device into the classroom, and then it jumps to 83 and 87. We also asked them questions about restrictions. If you allow students, do you do it with restrictions or without restrictions? Again, a very high percentage of the K-12, both elementary, secondary, K-12, almost 79 to 80% allow devices but with restrictions. And then at post-secondary, the 2-year and 4-year, they're a little more lenient. First of all, about 50% of post-secondary say that with restrictions compared to 40% for 4-year. So they do allow, but with restrictions. And when we asked what those restrictions were, and this is based on open-ended, so this isn't a quantitative analysis, but these were the most common restrictions mentioned, that first of all, they had to follow the district and school policy. So most of these districts and schools have a policy in place now, or they're putting it together. Interestingly, they said the teacher has total discretion over how it's used in the classroom, and that ultimately they have the control. And many of them even said that the teachers had were allowed and permitted to take over the device if it was being used improperly. That most of them said it had to be used for education purposes only. Many of them had to register. But the things that were not allowed, interestingly, no Twitter, no texting, social media, Facebook, games, or music. So it's, as somebody said, it's all the fun stuff they're not allowing, but it's strictly for educational purposes. Schools are still struggling with this, trying to figure out the best way to allow students to bring their own devices in. But they are figuring it out, and it clearly says that you'll be seeing more and more devices in the years ahead. Has an impact on product development and marketing and everything that you're doing with products for education. In terms of looking at some of the key findings around the current to ideal integration, what's interesting is that, because last year was the first year that we added this question about ideal, is that we have not seen a lot of change in ratings. It's been pretty consistent, and that about 20% of K-12 and 30% of post-secondary report that they're integrating at a very high level. But yet 75% of them rate the importance and the ideal level very highly. And so at both K-12 and post-secondary, the current integration level is behind the ideal level, not surprisingly. And also that post-secondary consistently higher at both their current and ideal level than K-12. I don't think that's also all that unusual, because technology was starting to be used and integrated in post-secondary, and also because of the age of students and their propensity to use a lot of technology. And when we analyze and we slice and dice the data in many, many different ways, because we look at demographic information and all the ways that we have looked at it, the key differentiator is really between post-secondary and K-12. That's where we see the greatest difference on all the variables and all of the questions that we asked. This slide here just shows you a real snapshot of what we found in terms of the level of technology integration. So you'll see here that at the current level, the little round ball for K-12, this is at the lower level is their current level of integration, and then the triangle shows their ideal level. So you can see the gap between current and ideal. Post-secondary, the current is higher, and the ideal is also higher. And then the perceived importance. This year, perceived importance for K-12 was up a little bit, and perceived importance for post-secondary was down just a little bit. So this gives you just sort of a one-page screenshot of the overview. Whoops. Excuse me. The next slide shows, this is just on K-12 here, and this is comparing the 2013 versus 2012. This is the current level of integration, then the importance level, and then the ideal level. So that you'll see, again, very little change between the 2 years, and you'll see here this, 20%, their current level of integration is high, and yet 81% and 75%, their importance and ideal level is very high. So you can see this difference. On these questions, the questions about current importance and ideal, it was on a 1 to 7 point scale, which is a little different than our benchmark questions, which are on a 1 to 4 point scale. So that's why you'll see the average scores over here vary from 4.4 up to the 6.1. When we look at the post-secondary participants, again, you'll see a very, they're up to 30% of their current integration level, and over 80% and 83% in terms of importance and ideal. So there, the gap between current and ideal is a little smaller than it is for the K-12 participants. When we start to look at the individual benchmarks, and we take all of the 20 benchmarks and look at the average score. Again, what's been amazing is that over the last 3 years, the scores have been very, very consistent, both for K-12 and post-secondary. There just has not been a lot of movement or change, both in their current and in their ideal. So you'll see here for K-12, again, remembering that we didn't add the ideal until 2012, but you'll see it jumped from 2.39 to 2.42. Again, this is on average on a score of 1 to 4, with the ideal being 3.71 and jumping up to 3.76. So again, not a lot of difference. Same with post-secondary, very similar. And we'll come back to why we think that has been that way. What is interesting is that when we look at the 20 benchmarks for K-12 and the 20 benchmarks for post-secondary, the 4 benchmarks that have the highest current usage have remained exactly the same for the past 3 years for both K-12 and post-secondary. They're the highest in terms of current integration, and they're the highest in terms of being closest to the ideal. And number 1 is security tools. So not surprisingly, they're really their top priority, and the type of thing they're focusing on and that they're integrating is keeping student data and information private. That's where they're putting a lot of their initiatives. Second to that is the access to adequate bandwidth. And I think as we all know, as more and more content has gone online, as more curriculum has gone online, as more assessment has gone online, the issue of bandwidth is a big one. And so that's where they're continuing to focus a lot of their energy. And then a website portal to provide the whole education community with access. So those 4 benchmarks have been the same for the last 3 years, and in the same order and the same sense of priority for both K-12 and post-secondary. Then we look at the individual benchmarks and we say, where has there been the greatest change, either positive or negative, year over year? Again, not a lot of them had a lot of movement, but the ones that did for K-12, it had to do with the anytime, anywhere access for bandwidth for instructional purposes. So that went up significantly, the most of any other benchmark. And then secondly was technology-based assessments. And again, not surprising with the focus on assessment and getting prepared for Common Core. The one that went down a little bit was access to adequate bandwidth for robust communication. And that has to do, what we imply from that is that they're the communication bandwidth for emails and communicating doesn't need to be as robust as it does for content and really rich, robust instructional and multimedia and video, and that they're shifting some of their emphasis to accommodate more of that instructional content, whereas the communication doesn't take quite as much. When we look at the post-secondary benchmarks, the one that went up the most in the post-secondary market had to do with electronic supplemental resources and online tutoring accessible to all students tied into differentiated learning. And the things where they actually fell off a little bit had to do with, again, the adequate bandwidth for communication, and then the ubiquitous, reliable access to resources through a multitude of mobile devices and through wireless Wi-Fi access points, and the institution leaders being able to use technology tools for planning, budgeting, and decision making. This just means that these didn't jump up in terms of significant changes from the previous year. In terms of the technology measures and the 7 educational goals, again, what we do is you roll up the scores for the 20 benchmarks and then measure them and compile them for the 5 technology measures and the 7 goals. And again, this shows where their vision of where they would like to be. And we'll talk about, in terms of both K-12 and post-secondary, the technology measures showed the similar priorities between the two. So both K-12 and post-secondary are saying enterprise support is one of the most important in terms of getting a score on a 1 to 4 scale of 3.86. So enterprise support, then anytime, anywhere access, 21st century tools, differentiated learning, and assessment. Those items are in exactly the same order, whether you're K-12 or post-secondary. Very closely aligned. This shows the ideal compared to the current level of technology integration. And the top green bar shows the 2013 ideal, and the top red open bar shows the comparison to the 2012 ideal. So you'll see here again, enterprise support, the ideal is the highest ideal of all of the 5 technology measures, and then these solid bars below show, again, green is 2013, red is 2012, and blue is 2011. So you'll see how similar they are, and this shows you the gap between their current level versus their ideal. So in terms of what takes priority and where they're putting their efforts, the assessment tools, they have also one of the biggest gaps, as well as differentiated learning. And while these are all fairly important, you can see which ones they rate in what order. And again, not a lot of movement year over year. When we look at the 7 educational goals for K-12, the same thing. The first one is to facilitate communication, connectivity, and collaboration. That's what they rate as where they want to be. It has the highest ideal score. And then this shows where they currently are, the 2.71. Again, looking at all of these items, there isn't a lot of variation year over year, both in terms of their ideal score and their current level of integration. One of the things that we believe is happening, the reason that these scores have stayed so similar over the years is, and we think actually it's not necessarily a negative story, because as schools have really had difficult budgets, difficult economic times, and the bar for technology integration continues to get higher and higher, they've kept up. They've maintained. They haven't lost any ground, and they have found ways to overcome some of their budget restrictions and still keep current, which, as we all know, technology continues to keep moving forward. You'll see the same thing on the post-secondary, again, looking first at the technology measures, the 5 technology measures, and where they are current against ideal. Again, just not a lot of change year over year, both in terms of their ideal and their current level of integration. A lot of variations, and you can see in some of these comments, in terms of how different schools are viewing and integrating technology. When we look at the 7 educational goals, we found the same thing. At the very top is this: facilitate communication, connectivity, and collaboration. And again, the ideal to the current level is very consistent year over year. I see one comment here, or one question, where it said, please define enterprise support. And enterprise support is defined in the survey as sort of all of those systems and online systems that help the institution function. And everything, really at the higher level of enterprise. Sue, do you want to add anything to that, and or Karen?
Yeah, I can add that. This is Karen. Those things that have to do with procurement, human resources, professional development, those things that the districts or the total campus folks tend to install and use system-wide.
Yeah, and anything that, like information systems, the basically the security tools, all of that supports the functioning of the enterprise. Another question was, please clarify website portal benchmark in terms of what that means. And that generally means where the institution has a portal that is open for either their students, their educators, and in many cases I think it goes out to parents in K-12, out to the community, that they have a way to access information for that district or school, is what it's meant.
Yep.
Does
that cover it?
Did anybody want to add anything, Sue or Karen?
No, I think that was great.
Okay. Some comments just from survey participants, and we do include, it is a quantitative survey primarily, with some open-ended questions, and so we do, throughout the survey, there are a few places where we ask for comments, or at the very end we ask for just general comments about the survey and their participants and their view of technology. And we get, a wide range of comments, as you can imagine. So it varies from, people view it as a very important survey, and many of the educators have taken this year over year, and they use their surveys to compare with how they're doing, to some of them saying that, it's a waste of time, nobody pays any attention to this, sort of that frustration that some feel. But many of them are saying, technology is very important and we need to get this information, which is why SIIA has been doing this and trying to help the educators. Again, this is an online tool for them to help evaluate where they are in terms of their own integration. So the challenge is to reaching sort of these ideal levels of implementation. One, clearly funding, many comments about funding. And it's not just the funding for the first acquisition, it's about the ongoing support, whether that has to do with maintenance, staff training, professional development, updates, all of the other costs that go into total cost of ownership. Leadership, many times they talked about the difficulty of having turnover in leadership at their school or their district or their campus, where a leader may be a big supporter of technology and then they leave and go somewhere else, and a new person comes on board and doesn't have the same commitment, and so they find that very frustrating. Not surprisingly, time, just the time to find, to learn how to use it, to implement it, to figure out how to integrate it into your class or your course. Technology obsolescence, a lot of concerns about this, nothing new to all of those of us in technology, where they get concerned about making an investment and then having it become obsolete. And accessibility. They know more and more that they need to have it accessible to all from, that anytime, anywhere access, and trying to find a way to do that with all of the broadband and communication issues that we know about. Finally, just some notable highlights. is, again, we think that in spite of the budgets and the stresses, the economic stresses and strains, that the schools and districts are holding up in spite of it all. And that they have been, while we haven't seen a big shift in scores, they've been keeping up while the bar for technology integration continues to get higher and higher. And the importance, there's still this deep commitment to technology integration. They see it as very important, and they have a high level for their ideal. The BYOD is definitely gaining ground. Post-secondary is way ahead, but K-12 will be catching up quickly if you look at what they plan over the next 5 years. Finally, as we talked about, there isn't a lot of change. That the area that's the closest is the broadband and security. And it also suggests that some of the things that have been integrated are the things that might be decisions made at the top with fewer people involved, whereas some of the decisions that involve many different constituents weighing in on it may become more difficult. And once we go through the highlights, we will address, I see we're getting a number of questions, which is great, and we'll just wrap up the highlights in a few minutes, then we'll go back and address those questions and see if we can speak to them individually. I will just mention that we are introducing, right now actually, it is currently live, a beta version, a new version of the survey that we're testing out to see if we can get to even more granular information to dig deeper into this information. Yeah. Again, to reinforce that to everyone, you will be able to get copies of the slide and the report. And let me just look at some of the questions.
Yeah, I think, Susan, let's start with some of the ones that are on top. I think there's one here from Amy asking about, the activity to enable students to learn from all places has gone down, but it seems like the desire to do it is the same. If you're clear on what that question is, I'd love for you to answer that one first.
Okay, let me just look at that. If it looks like, okay, the question, I think, if I can go back to the previous slides, I think I know what they're referencing. And let me try to clarify. The Anytime, Anywhere access as a technology measure has actually gone up a little bit from 2.43 to 2.5. So the commitment to this Anytime, Anywhere access is still there. When we looked at the individual benchmarks, and remember there are a number of benchmarks that feed up into the individual technology measures and educational goals. So what we saw was that there was this question about access to adequate bandwidth, or no, I think the one that they're referencing, ubiquitous, reliable access to resources and services available through a multitude. Is that the one? The question was, am I understanding that the actual activity to enable students to learn from any place has gone down, but the desire is still the same?
So it looks like, yeah, that she's comparing that piece of it to the other one where when you add all of them together, all of the benchmarks together, it does go up slightly.
Right, yeah.
I think there's the difference, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, Amy, if we can clarify later a little bit more for you, let us know. Robin had one about the tech capabilities of the responders, if we asked anything about that and how comfortable they were using technology. And I don't believe that we did, but if you can clarify that, that would be good.
Right. We did not ask them individually how comfortable they are teaching it or how they would self-rate their own level of technology, which is kind of an interesting question. We did ask them about, their title, where they're located, the size of their district, how they would qualify their building, school, or classroom, but we didn't ask them individually.
Yeah. And just in the comment field, Katrina's got a couple of them. couple of questions, but one is about whether or not any of the teachers expressed concern about the digital divide as part of accessibility issues. I'm not sure what came up in all of the comments that you got back, and you may not remember right offhand, and need to check it, but I don't remember the digital divide coming up as a specific concern, but if you do, please clarify that.
I can go back and look at them, and I would guess that, well, I don't remember anything specifically. I would guess that there probably were at least a few comments, because that almost always comes up, you know, in some places, where, especially in some of the very rural districts. But I will go back and look specifically at that.
Yeah. We always have this desire to ask more questions because it's a chance to get information from educators, and we also then have to hold back and ask fewer questions than we want, so that it is a survey that's not going to take them 45 minutes to do, because we know they're not going to spend that much time on it. So we always cut out questions that we'd love to have their responses to. I'm going to address Katrina's question about surveying a select group. Most of these folks are not connected to SIIA because and we'll look at the partner slides here in a moment. In fact, if Lindsay wants to move over to the partner slides, that would be great. I'm going to put that one up. Probably 5 or 6 years ago, when we first started the survey, we were then, going to educators who had email addresses and were members of either COSIN, ISTE, or the NEA, or partners that we have that helped us reach them. We connect to the ed tech companies. Our members are the companies, and we don't really know how to reach the educators per se. We use partners in many different ways. One of them is to help us find judges for our CODI program, and another one is to help take this survey. So we use them, and again, some of them are actively focused on technology and some are not. Lindsay, do you want to say a few words about our partners and how they helped us?
So these are our partners who helped us get the word out about the survey, many through special email blasts or blurbs in their newsletters, tweeting, all of that sort of thing. This year we got a really great cross-section of educators because we had so many different partners and so many different organizations that people could belong to, as well as on Twitter. We had a lot going on there, and anyone can view it that way. So one of our biggest partner for the year was EdWeb, and I think there are some people from EdWeb on this call. And I just wanted to say a big thank you to them for reaching out to the entire EdWeb community, which is an online social networking community for educators. They got the most out of anyone else, and we really appreciate their help. As you can see, it's a very diverse group of vision partners, and all of them did a little something to help us get the word out, reach out to new people, and just let everyone know what was going on with our Vision K-20 survey, and we did get about 1,500 responses. So,
and one thing I'll add is that, when you see ISTE and COSIN, et cetera, you know that their members have been probably for a while pretty focused on technology and are more comfortable with technology. But folks like Today's Catholic Teacher are, while they have email addresses and that they can reach their readers in different ways, their use of technology could be quite advanced and perhaps couldn't be. So we rely on them. University Business and NISOD and League for Innovation, et cetera, are eCampus News are partners on the higher ed level. If any of you have suggestions about reaching more of our post-secondary college higher ed folks, let us know, because that's always been the most difficult for us to get in terms of responses and even in terms of partners. We have good partners, but we need more of them because we have more K-12, and therefore we always get more K-12 responders. I'm trying to see if there's anything else in terms of questions. Let's see. Oh, Amy has another one. Do we see any issues in students that are currently getting K-12 education when they move into post-secondary? In other words, are students having access to fantastic innovations be a problem when they attend college? I love Susan's response to this, but my first response is that when they go on to college, they've got more access to using their digital devices, their own, because they were the first to sort of institute that they could be used in their classrooms, whereas a lot of K-12 have said not. A lot of the post-secondary have been the first to do online learning, first to require computer access, first to do a number of things when it came to technology, mostly because they had the experience and or the older students who were either demanding it or they didn't have to worry about some of the COPA rules and all of the other things that we do in K-12. Susan, do you want to take a stab at that? And if anybody else has questions, we've just got a couple minutes left. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat box.
Yeah. Karen, you answered it beautifully, because I was thinking the same thing, that by the time the students generally are going to college, they're bringing their own devices, multiple devices. They are sharing with other students things that they've learned and known and used over the years. So I think they have much more freedom and to really use whatever they can to support their own learning. I think they become much more self-directed in terms of what they use, and it's much more open even for them there. So I don't know that that's a big problem, but it would be an interesting question to ask.
Yeah, if for some reason we tracked, student access, which we don't do, and it'd be a great study though to get to students as they go through particularly secondary schools and then into post-secondary, and just get their sense of the differences in access to technology, and more than access, what the real learning opportunities have been with technology.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Got a few minutes left. And thank you, Amy, for asking. Both you and Katrina and a few others asked some great questions, and we appreciate that. So one of the things that you need to do, if you go to SIIA.net/VisionK20, you'll see more information about the Vision Project. We are looking for evidence that technology works. You'll see when you go to that page that you can go to something that says evidence, and we are looking for case studies, research, evaluation reports, success stories that we can align with our vision goals or any of our technology benchmarks and post them. And they can come from school districts and from companies and organizations, research groups. It needs to be credible, but we will certainly vet that. The other thing is, if you want to get the actual report of our Vision K-20 paper and the exec summary, just go to SIIA.net/eStore. Or if you just go to SIIA.net, in upper right-hand corner, you'll see SIA Store. When you click on that, ask for education. I think these two reports, the executive summary, which is like 4 or 5 pages, I think, that Lindsay put together, and then the full report that MMS wrote, which is significantly more pages, but all of the good data, lots of great charts, and very well explained, then it's there for anybody to download. So feel free to do that. And let's see, we have one last question from Shalon. Are member companies who participate going to be receiving the report? Clearly, Shalon, we will be letting all of our member companies know how to access it, but we really want to have everybody access the report, as many people as possible. So it's not a members-only report. it is open to everyone in the education community, but perhaps LaDerby, you and I and Lindsay can figure out a way to make sure that our members know that the report is available to them. We could get it to them in a number of ways. Katrina has one last question here. Are they expressing concern that even after they have access, they don't know how to use the tool to really deepen and change the learning experience? I'm going to just put my own personal view in here, and then Susan can sort of respond given the actual questions and responses on the survey. But my sense is that most educators feel like they would like to get to know, to use the tools to deepen the learning experiences more so. I think they constantly feel that education, the technology is going faster than they have time to keep up, and it's one thing to learn how to use the new piece of technology. It's another thing to learn how to really use it in the classroom for student learning needs, and to make sure that it really does deepen those learning experiences. I don't know that they express that, but my sense is that most educators who are faced with trying to integrate technology into the classroom are concerned about that, and their goal would be to always improve in that level. Sue or Susan, do you have any comments to add to that?
I would agree 100% that they, one, have concerns about getting enough professional development around technology, but that's both a funding issue and a time issue, the time to learn it. And then it's not just learning how to use the technology, but just as you said, Karen, it's how do I really integrate this into my class, and how do I make sure that it is really helping to benefit students, and that it's not just using technology for the sake of using technology. But I think it's a lot of, they feel the pressures of everything that they're being asked to do every day, and then finding the time to learn new technology and learn how to implement it is one of the real challenges.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this is Sue. I would agree that the biggest challenge right now is time. You know, where do they find the time for all those things that Susan just enumerated, and the pressures to use the technologies in ways that they really don't know or not comfortable with yet, and then the time to actually make it work in a classroom.
Okay. All right. Well, I think with that, we're going to close off. If any of you do have more questions that come up, particularly once you download the report or come back and take a look at the slides, we will be letting you know when we are posted the slides and in a PDF form, and you can look at them all over again. But please do feel free to contact us. We are happy to answer your questions. And if you didn't take the survey, if you're an educator and didn't take the survey and would like to, then please let us know that, because we want to make sure that you are added to the list to take next year's survey. We'd love it if you took the beta survey now, just because we really need to get that final testing in and make sure that it works before it goes out to many, many more people. Thank you all for attending today, and with that, we'll close the webinar.
So.
Thank you. Please stand by.